where deliberation happens. What do you mean by deliberation? Discussion on what is important. Why is discussion important in a democracy? Ultimately, democracy is about arriving at a consensus. If not consensus, at least the opposition's view is considered, addressed, and then we arrive at a middle ground. Clear? And you need time for that. When you're not dedicating the time, the possibility of deliberation minimizes. And once that possibility of deliberation is reduced, the outcomes will obviously be one-sided. This is the problem statement that we are dealing with. How to make parliaments productive. There are two aspects to productivity. One is with respect to the quality. Two is with respect to the quantity. How much time is allotted for deliberation on any bills that are passed? This is the quantitative aspect of productivity. A metric, number. Second aspect is quality. What kind of bills are being passed? Are the bills that are passed or the acts that are legislated, are they enhancing the quality of life of people or the citizens? And are the bills staying true to democratic credentials? These two facets will decide the quality of democracy in our country. And therefore, parliamentary productivity is not just a metric of how do I put it? Not just a metric of democracy for its namesake, but also improves the quality of life. So in this context, I'll slightly be deviating and I'll bring an interesting discussion, because I was watching the podcast between Nikhil Kamath. You know who is Nikhil Kamath, right? There's a podcast between Nikhil Kamath and Elon Musk. In that interview, in that podcast, Nikhil Kamath asked, why do you think the world should have a collective consciousness? Or why do you think AI is important? See, here I'll just link both these aspects because they are really important to understand. There are similarities. Quality of democracy is linked to our wisdom. Similarly, consciousness or AI is linked to our wisdom. When you take these two parallel themes and link it to this topic, it will help you in curating arguments for your essay. Okay? So let's say here we are talking about wisdom of people. What do you mean by wisdom of people? The ability to judge what is good and bad. Knowledge is different and wisdom is different. Okay? Knowledge is knowing that a fire can burn. Wisdom is knowing that you shouldn't touch it. Both are two different aspects. So why is it important for the humanity collectively to be wiser than what we were there yesterday? In that interview, he fumbled a lot. There was a long pause on curating an answer in that podcast. And finally, he came up with an answer saying that we have more neurons collectively. So he equated it with computers. Just like how computers will have multiple GPUs, if human mind has many more neurons, we will be quicker and faster. At that point of time, I think maybe if we can equate it, he eventually explained it further. After a long pause, he was thinking out loud in that. That pause is what I am focused on here. Pause means you are stopping and thinking, which is exactly what is required to come up with better arguments, better judgments. And this exactly is what is missing in Indian Parliament as of now, according to the article. Why am I saying this? Because eventually when he was thinking out loud in that podcast, he came up with an answer saying that I might want to build a spaceship alone. But if I sit down and try to learn everything by myself, my entire life will not be enough to learn everything that is out there. It is important to bring all the minds that are needed for building that spaceship together under a platform called Tesla or SpaceX in that context. That collectiveness, that collective strength of human mind translated into a better outcome called SpaceX. That's the answer he gave. If a few people can come together, what if the entire humanity and its collective strength, collective wisdom can come onto a platform? And that collective strength will be a huge leverage to any person who has the ability to ask the right questions. And for all of that, you need to take a pause, think, deliberate. Otherwise, you won't be processing the qualitative aspect of anything. Just like how you need to stop, think, and then respond, even Parliament has to stop, think, deliberate, discuss, and come up with a better answer for a lot of questions. And we need to arrange our institutions according to that. So the common point that I'm trying to make is, we all think Elon Musk is a very wise person, right? He has done a lot. So many startups, very intelligent person, very high IQ levels, the richest man on the earth. If he couldn't answer a question in a straight manner on a topic that he stayed with for a very long time, he spent his entire life almost in the last decade on this conversation of AI alone. He couldn't answer why is this needed. Do you expect a parliamentarian to have a straightforward answer? Not really. And that's why it's important to have collectiveness in anything. With the rise of AI, we just have answers for everything. We just don't have the questions. And we need time to figure out those questions. Parliament is a very good space to have those questions, and that's why it's important to improve the quality of argument too. And that's why the time is needed for deliberation. Clear? Quantity and quality, two aspects. Now coming back to the statistics of this article. Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. Let's say question hour. What is question hour and why is it important? Static part, yes. The first hour of any parliamentary proceeding which is reserved for any discussion, any issue that any MP feels it is important to ask and hold the parliament or the government executive accountable. It's an instrument of accountability. And the name indicates that it is a question hour. Only 1 hour is there. 0 hour, 1 hour, question hour. These are few devices which are the only places where you can catch hold of the government and question them. When those sessions are also wasted with disruptions, sloganeering, etc., you're literally wasting and whiling away the time, which would ultimately reduce the quality of arguments and deliberations in a democracy. The latest statistics here and also here, it will show you the statistics both in terms of quality and quantity. The deliberations are decreasing, which can hamper the quality of democracy. As a matter of principle, there is a reason why those devices are given a place in our accountability mechanism, and we need to respect that. The decline in this quality is a blot on the productivity aspect of our democracy. Okay? So this is the argument that you can create. So question, what are the instruments of parliamentary accountability? Devices that can hold parliamentary accountability. Parliament accountable. trace out the recent trends in parliamentary productivity, critically examine the data. This can be a question. Can I ask this question in mains? Yes or no? Why is it important? They represent the quality of democracy. Okay? So, revise your static from Lakshmikant and the latest dynamic part from this article. Club them both, you have your answer. Moving on. Urgent need to transform people's perception of police. Okay. Why is this topic important? Yes? Sorry? Trust. Trust-based governance. Why is trust important in a democracy or with any government? Trust is the grease that keeps the governance engine running. It's the invisible grease that keeps the engine smooth. When there is no trust, there is a lot of friction. And that friction can eventually rust the system and collapse the system. When people don't trust our institutions, where will you go? It's a sign of the failure of the social contract between the state and individuals. Right. In that principle of trust, which is supposed to be there in every institution, the most important one is police. If you roughly translate the word police into some acronym or some phrase which will signify the importance of police, I would say police stands for protector of law in civil enforcement. The first line of defense. When any issue pops up in law and order, who would be the first person you will contact? The police. If that institution itself fails, where do you go? It would lead to vigilante justice. It would lead to the rise of Rocky Bai from KGF. Institutions should never glorify individuals. If something like that is happening, it means it's a sign of decaying institutions. Individuals add a lot of charishma to the institutions, but they're never above them. And if that's the case, it's the failure of the concept of rule of law. Clear? So, there is a mismatch between this expectation of police being the first defender and the perception of the public, which leads to a culture of mistrust in a democracy. That culture of mistrust will eventually erode the democratic values. This is the principle. Now, when it comes to how this question can be asked, this can be mapped to criminal justice system. There are various facets of criminal justice system, among which police are very important. In 2006, Supreme Court gave a guideline in a famous case called the Prakash Singh guidelines. Prakash Singh case of 2006 guidelines. Why Supreme Court is only giving guidelines? Because it's not the job of Supreme Court to create laws. Even if Ministry of Home Affairs create a law, it can only be a model law because law and order is a state subject. So these guidelines are supposed to be implemented by the various states, and Ministry of Home Affairs being the nodal agency trying to coordinate between the multiple states in a quasi-federal structure like India, where there is a unitary bias, but also autonomy for the states. This principle of Prakash Singh guidelines should be implemented across the states because they form the basis of good governance with respect to the police. The best possible practices which re-establish the lost trust are established through the Prakash Singh guidelines. Okay. Now, what are the areas that we need to work upon in contemporary times? If you read the speech of our Prime Minister and also our Home Minister in the previous similar summit, last year our Home Minister attended it. This time it's the Prime Minister himself attending this event. And you can identify the themes in GS2 governance as well as GS3 internal security. Because ultimately, this is a very major event. All the state police heads are meeting at one place to discuss about internal security. It will find its way into the Ministry of Home Affairs report, and the themes discussed in this meeting will eventually form the basis for your mains questions. If you take a look at the questions or the themes, first is NAT grid. What is NAT grid? National Intelligence Grid is a centralized intelligence database. I told you that law and order is a state subject. When states maintain their individual databases, if a crime happens between, let's say there is a criminal who is evading one state police and entering into some other state, there needs to be a common intelligence gathering platform between the two states. So all the states are supposed to share that intelligence network. You can create entry barriers for respective state police. Only on special access you can access that intelligence. You can do that. That will ensure that autonomy of different states is retained. But when the need arises, there needs to be a access, right? That access point is nothing but National Intelligence Grid. And there is a need to coordinate and approach as whole of government. What do you mean by this whole of government approach? Whole of society approach? When you are trying to solve a problem, it is not the onus of one agency alone. In this case, for example, if you want to keep India safe, you need the Defense External Affairs Ministry, Defense Ministry, internal security agencies, intelligence agencies. When I say internal security agency, NIA or IB, internal, external, both, RAW, even state police, coast guard, navy, armed forces, everyone should coordinate in their own way, all the while maintain their own jurisdiction. This is what we call as the whole of government approach. Clear? Now, in this whole of government approach, the main problem is lack of coordination or interoperability between various systems, which is a technical issue that needs to be sorted out. Just like how in the olden days, like in the initial days of fintech, when we didn't have UPI, let's say you want to transfer money from PhonePe to Paytm, that interoperability architecture was virtually absent. And that problem was solved when government came into the picture and created this BHIM or UPI. That's when every major fintech player got onto the UPI architecture and interoperability became seamless, which led to an exponential rise in fintech. People started using all these wallets, whether it is PhonePe, Paytm, etc., primarily because there was a government backing. So that's the collective. Again, you can see here the same thought that we were discussing. When people come together, it's a strength, not a liability. And that's the same demonstrative force that we need to show here also. And respect the needs of this country. That's what the article is talking about. So that is one theme, NAT grid. Then he talked about establishing mechanisms for regular monitoring of banned outfits, holistic development of left-wing extreme areas, adopting innovative models to strengthen coastal security. You got three themes here. Development in left-wing extremism areas, coastal security, banned outfits to avoid the problem of radicalization. All these problems require a whole of government approach. Are you following me? The themes in this article. First is the need for police reforms under governance. GS2 governance, criminal justice system, under that police reforms. Prakash Singh case is an important judgment there. 7 steps taken in that Prakash Singh judgment and the status. This is one possible theme. Please note down. Please go back and do this homework so that you can fix that entire issue. Okay? Prakash Singh case, police reforms. DK Basu is also a part of this, but in this case, when we are talking about the governance aspect, it is DK Basu guidelines are more in the direction of investigative procedures and the whole third degree dimensions. But when you're talking about the governance architecture, Prakash Singh case is much more relevant. Okay. After that, when you move into the GS3 domain, what are the thematic areas that you need to focus on? One, don't just say left-wing extremism. It's a beaten to death topic. You know what left-wing extremism is. Every standard textbook will give you a definition, history of Naxalism, steps taken by the government, Samadhan strategy. All this are fine. What is the next theme that UPSC can ask a question on? Strategies for development in left-wing extremism areas. That's a very specific theme. What is the difference? This is the same thing that we were talking about all the while. Security should be there, development should be there, and that's how we will progress. You're missing one point. If government is trying to develop that area, why do you think locals are still supporting Naxalites? Mistrust. So the agenda here is not to develop infrastructure, not the typical physical infrastructure, but to work on the social infrastructure. And the foundation for that is trust. So how do you build that trust? Think about it. If you are the Prime Minister of this country and you want to build that trust in left-wing extremism areas, what's the first step that you will take? How? Empowerment is a very broad answer. Tell me the mechanism. Don't you think we already have that? What is PESA? We have every law that is needed. Just make it happen. The first step that you should take is implement the Forest Rights Act, implement PESA, and demand an annual accountability statement from the Gram Panchayat level. The problem will be solved. All it takes is that political will. We have all the laws that are needed. It's just the implementation that is lacking. We have come a long way. We did come a long way. See, because you can't expect an officer to go and sit in an area where people are very triggered. His life is under threat. So you definitely need a security force in that area. But having said that, you also need an element of empathy and a larger heart to win over the minds of the people. And it doesn't come with coercion. It comes with your ability to spread your hands and welcome them, give them the respect and dignity they deserve, implement the Forest Rights Act, implement PESA, and bring them back into the social fold. They're not supporting the left-wing extremists because they like them more. They are scared of the government, or they don't trust the government because of the history of mistrust. It's going to take some time. Let it take. But the direction should be set. And I think we have come a long way if you take a look at the Ministry of Home Affairs statistics. The strategy of Samadhan is indeed working, and we need to keep at it. What is required more is publicizing this effort. Okay? Now, when it comes to the other aspects of radicalization, what do you mean by radicalization? Influencing the minds of the vulnerable sections with an ideology in in a bid to attack the sovereignty of this country. Primarily, there are various forms of radicalization with various intents, but as far as internal security of India is concerned, the biggest threat is religious fundamentalism, which is linked to communalism. So that radicalization process is usually again the same. There is an element of mistrust and apathy, or a perception of apathy rather, which needs to be corrected, and that mismatch between what is the reality and how information is engineered and fed into their minds. We need to break that vicious cycle. That is the radicalization as a theme which you need to work upon. Okay, that is another theme in internal security. Now, the third theme, coastal security. See, after the 26/11 attacks on Mumbai in 2008, it exposed the vulnerability of our coastal security architecture, which underwent a major revamp after that. So you can just type coastal security and go back to the 26/11 of last year. There is an article last year or the one before that. Go back to that date on my Telegram channel. There is an elaborate article on what is the present coastal security architecture. You read that article and sum it up. That's more than enough for your mains answer. You just have to write 150 words. We'll get more than that in that article. Clear? So these are the themes of internal security, GS2 governance, police reforms, all clubbed under one news article. This is how you have to read the newspaper. You have to mind map the content given in the newspapers to respective themes, figure out what questions can be asked. Okay? If you do this activity, you are minimizing the reaction time in the actual exam. And this is what we would be practicing in our usual classes. This is what we should ideally be practicing in our classes. Clear? In an era of AI and climate change, energy policy must navigate new trade-off. I think this topic has been discussed multiple times, but I'll quickly sum it up for you. See, energy. I'll again go back to that podcast because it's a very interesting podcast for me. I'll try to, because I don't want you guys to spend more time on it. So I'll pass on whatever I found interesting in that podcast to you also. In that podcast, in a conversation between a billionaire, Nikhil Kamath, and a trillionaire, Elon Musk, they were discussing about how money is not important anymore. Because they have so much of it. But in this whole context, I realized there is one thing common between both of them. Both of them are obsessed with the idea of solving a problem rather than thinking about money. And because of this thought process itself, they became the rich people that they are. And in that context, money is treated as a medium. Money is needed. Why? Because there are two double coincidence of wants, basic concept of economy. You want, let's say, milk, you want some other onion or something. Would you exchange onion for milk? Yes, probably if you need it. But I don't need onion, I would need something else. So I will have to figure out, waste my entire day, go around in the market to find a guy who would give me what I want. This problem is solved by money, which became a medium of exchange for reducing that pain point of finding the person I want. And when you give a government guarantee to that, it had some value because it can give me access to a lot of things. In a world where you have to work to earn that money, money becomes important. In a world where AI is replacing you and you don't do any work, money becomes worthless, is the assertion made by Elon Musk. Quite an interesting idea. In that context, he was talking about what is so important: energy. Because everything runs with electricity. Our life became easier, or I would rather say complicated in a way, because of the ability to switch on the light. Imagine a scenario where you have to sit with lanterns in this class and you can't have an internet access. You can't stream this class live. You will have to be present here physically with a lantern, sitting like a ghost in this. There's no access to electricity. Electricity increased productivity. Essentially, technology is nothing about improving that productivity and focusing our entire energy on higher purpose. Your job is not to figure out your next meal by using the light, just like the early cavemen. We moved beyond that, and at this juncture, the billionaire and a trillionaire are having a conversation about how money is not important. I wish the entire humanity eventually rises to that level. But the cost of making that happen is electricity. So, that is the context, that is the real importance of electricity. Didn't we know this? Of course, we knew this. If India is supposed to become a developed nation, we are supposed to produce more energy. This is the old funda. Energy access. What is the new funda? Because all the old schemes, like let's say for example Saubhagya or PM Kusum, all those kinds of old generic PM Suryagar Yojana are talking about giving access to some villages or some households. We are still at that level. On the other end of the spectrum, we have new entrants into the game, namely climate change and AI. If this is a WhatsApp group, when these two people entered, at least after the entry of this new player, Donald Trump left the chat. But he still needs power. He understands the new funda because AI is still relevant. He may not believe in the climate change. He might call it a fiasco, but he still understands the need of AI. The need of AI is more power. In a long time, India did not allow private players in nuclear power. A few days ago, that changed. You know why? The biggest technological revolution of this era is AI. Whether you like it or not, it will sweep every single domain, every single area. No single sector will be left untouched by AI. The way you use it will actually define you. Are you going to become its slave or master is up to you. But its presence is inevitable, whether you like it or not. If India doesn't adapt, the so-called tag of India being a hub of skilled IT engineers will now be reduced to an AI chatbot that will replace, let's say, tens or hundreds of engineers who will do the redundant repetitive tasks. There's no point in taking pride that we are a IT hub anymore. We need to adapt or perish. And the government realized this and they opened up the nuclear power. You might be wondering, what is the link between nuclear power and AI? Any idea? How? Small modular reactors, SMRs. This is going to be the biggest theme in energy access in the coming years, because every other source of power is unreliable or it has a externality. Let's say you're taking the case of coal. What is the externality? Pollution, climate change. It is amplifying pollution. You take hydropower. What is the problem? Monsoon. Unpredictable monsoons will hamper the energy access. You take solar. It is not available in the evenings and you don't have reliable battery technology. Until then, the world can't wait. India can't wait. The only available option is small modular reactors. And that's going to be a revolution, because every company can now have a on the field small nuclear power plant which will feed their data centers. So you might get a lot of articles on deliberations with respect to this, but it's eventually going to stay here. Is it safe? Is it not safe? That discussion can wait. Whether it is safe or unsafe, we don't have any other technological option that is reliable and accessible at this point of time. India realized it. We are going for it. So this is the context. This is a large step in the direction of energy transition. But there's a caveat here. Every government policy will have a sociological connotation. The other day, when we were talking about solar parks, I showed you a case study in Jharkhand where a floating solar park is impacting the livelihoods of fishermen and the pastoral communities who are grazing, who are taking their cattle for grazing on those open lands. Neither the lands nor the water will be accessible by them once the solar power plant which is floating will come in that area. So it disrupts the already vulnerable sections. Do we have a social rehabilitation policy? No. So energy transition is an incomplete agenda. The correct agenda is just energy transition, which is also the theme of COP30 summits this time. When I say just, it means justice. Clear? So this is the article. So larger theme is SDG 7, if I'm not wrong, energy access. Just energy transition should be the correct theme that you need to work on. To make this happen, you need technology and money. So the sub-themes will be, for the umbrella theme, just energy transition, sub-themes will be climate finance and clean technology. These two areas you will get a lot of questions in prelims. Clean tech and climate finance. Okay? If there is an initiative which is talking about these two, pay more attention to that in your prelims exam. Clear? Fine. Moving on to the next article. Again, this is an example that you can think of with respect to GS1 Indian Society, Unity in Diversity. Diversity is a fact of this country. Whether you like it or not, people have different preference for language and culture. So, if you want to keep them together, we need to put effort. It is not natural. So, unity is a logical necessity for India to exist. And there is an interesting story which is getting viral now. It's a very old statement given by movie director Rajamouli. He was talking about how way back in his childhood, he claims that he is an atheist. He doesn't actually believe in God, but his family is a very religious family, and they wanted Ganga Jal from the confluence, Triveni Sangam in Allahabad. So, or now it's Prayagraj. So, they sent him with 500 or 600 rupees to Allahabad, and he didn't know where to get that Ganga Jal from. This is the story he told. So, when asked, he was on a train. When asked, where are you going? He said that he got an order from his father that he should probably get some cans of Ganga Jal. And he only had 600 rupees. They were staying in Chennai. And he claimed that he never traveled north of Vizag, Vishakhapatnam then. So he didn't know much of Hindi language either. And yet he started. So upon knowing this, the gentleman in the train wrote down a letter to his son who stays in Prayagraj to help Mr. Rajamouli. Upon reaching there, he got a help letter which said that help this person. That person connected him to someone who makes those canisters, like containers. That person took him to the middle of that confluence, not from the ghat itself, so that there is a confluence, got some canisters of water, and he gave stay and accommodation to that person. And upon return, the coolies who saw that containers in the train realized that Rajamouli did not have any money. They just loaded those canisters and went away without taking money because it was for a very holy purpose. This is the story, end of the story. What is your conclusion now? So one interpretation is religion connects all of them. But he's an atheist. How does he have a place in this country then? Acceptance. Why? See, very multi-layered question, right? What is your interpretation after this story? You tell me what is the conclusion. I won't conclude the story there. I just want to hear your perspectives. It is tolerance towards diversity. What is the diversity here? In the story, I don't see any diversity. Except for the fact that he's a South Indian in a North Indian state. What is the tolerance aspect? Tolerance is a very negative word in my opinion. I'm tolerating you because you mean to say that I'm tolerating you because I don't want to be in jail. Respect, acceptance, respect. What is the source of that respect? See, if you're an atheist, if Rajamouli, who claims to be an atheist, he would see divinity in the person who's helping them. That culture has a place in this country. And the other person who's giving help to Rajamouli, every single stakeholder, is helping because he sees divinities in the process there. Both are actually the same. This is what Swami Vivekananda also says. Service to humanity is service to God. Manava Seve, Madhava Seva. That's what he says. And if you understand Vedanta correctly, Vedanta, it says that there is no duality. If you have the ability to say, if you have the ability to see divinity in everything around you and respect it and treat it with respect, that mutual respect is what holds humanity together. No matter what you believe is the source of that respect. On one hand, this is how I interpret it, because the clip ended there. There is no conclusion. He just told a story and the clip ended there. From his version, he respected the kindness of the people who were helping him and acknowledged it, and maybe that will inspire him to give back to someone who is in need of a help at a later point. And these people saw the helplessness of a person who wants to fulfill the wish of a father, who he himself will not agree, who he himself would not subscribe to that faith, but he respects the wish of his father. And that underlying respect is what keeps us together. And that's, let us not, use a very lower level word for it. I would say it's respect, not tolerance. And that's why Indian philosophy is sarva dharma samabhava, treating all religious with equal dignity and respect. That's the Indian philosophy that we're talking about. Why do I have to explain all of this? Because it is not natural for us to contemplate on these ideas when you read a newspaper article like this. Usually we will not even bother reading the headlines here. All you would know is Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat as an example of unity in diversity. Anyone writing mains, do you think in 2026 your answer will be special when you write Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat as a value added point? In 2014 it might have been a very good value add. Today it's a very generic point and even shows intellectual laziness. So spend some time and think on what could have been the underlying thought. Clear? Moving forward. India needs research pipelines. Long story short, when you don't innovate, what will happen? The economy stagnates, civilization stagnates. Compare that with China, they're spending much more than India. Usual standard template, every time the same article repeats. What should we do? Industry, academia, interface. There are 5 points given here. Point number 1. First, we must set a 3-year R&D to sales ratio. So every penny spent by any private player should translate into a economic outcome. Otherwise, they won't have an incentive to spend. Second point, co-funded projects and shared facilities offer matching grants where industry rupees flow through HEIs, higher education institutions, for multi-year projects. Long story short, you have to have a established mechanism from higher education institutes, again, industry academia interface. Then third, modernize tax instruments for research. If a company is investing in R&D, give them tax exemption. Fourth point, teach collaboration. Support campus programs that train faculty and PhD scholars to work with industry. In India, this is probably the only place where a PhD guy would not want to work with the industry but go back to the college because it's a job guarantee. Okay? That should not be the case. Fifth, ask listed companies to report R&D investments. We should probably ask Meesho, which is going for an IPO today, what is their R&D investment? You know what is an app, Meesho? Just Google it once, you'll understand. India's university campuses sit next to some of the world's most dynamic markets, and they carry knowledge traditions that examine technology as a partner in human inquiry. We are underutilizing the potential of Indian talent and Indian companies, and it's an amalgamation of various factors. Government policy, culture of R&D, culture of the families that look at people in R&D. In India, a scientist is never celebrated as much as a film star or a sports star, to that matter. I mean, no disrespect to what they bring to the table. Sports stars and film stars unite people like none other. But how many of you know that in the same year Sachin Tendulkar got Bharat Ratna, there is one more scientist who got Bharat Ratna too? Can you tell his name? How many of us know that name? Do you know what he did? What was his area of research? Solid state chemist. But how is it relevant for Indian scene? What problem can it solve? Not a lot of people know this. And it's because there's no culture. The minute you graduate, you are either supposed to get into a job, or the greatest export quality product that India produces is human capital. We export human beings to US. And that culture should end, and it's not going to be easy unless we get back to the fundamentals. There should be an incentive for research. And in the present situation, life is not easy for scientists. That needs to change. This brings us to the end of the articles today. There are a couple of other articles, but the time is done. I thought I'll complete those articles too, but we'll take it up in some other day. Okay, that's it for the day. Thank you.